I beseech you, in the bowels of Christ, think it possible you may be mistaken. So wrote Oliver Cromwell in 1660, but those words could easily apply nearly 350 years later. As we are watching our country split down ideological lines for the first time in my lifetime, I am truly fearful that we are going down a path from which we may not be readily able to return. An ideologically driven debate has punted the ball of environmental responsibility so far downfield that scientists believe we are on the cusp of passing the point of no return, while others believe we may have already passed it. It is what happens when ideology guides us over reason and common sense, and the result is catastrophic. For the first time in history, our children's life expectancy is less than our own. The threat of ideology was virtually foretold by Thomas Jefferson in an 1822 letter to James Smith, when he said, quote, "Man, once surrendering his reason, has no remaining guard against absurdities the most monstrous, and like a ship without a rudder, is the sport of every wind." Unquote. In recent years, we have witnessed the suspension of reason in favor of ideology at almost every turn. A tolerant left has stood by when the right told us to suspend reason for faith that dinosaurs roamed the earth with humans. While they knew this with the same certitude that others before them knew the world was flat, we knew better, and did our best to prevent that talk from being given credence in a science class, much as we wouldn't allow a health class to be sponsored by Philip Morris. But overall, the right's ideology wasn't hurting us. A tolerant left stood by when the right asked the United States Congress to suspend the reason of medical doctors for the certitude of faith that Terry Schiavo wasn't really brain dead. We knew better, and when she died, no autopsy proved that the doctors were correct. This, of course, didn't matter to the right wing, because they had surrendered reason. I am not sure if it was Roe v. Wade, the Reagan Revolution, Terry Schiavo, stem cell research, or torture, but somewhere along the way the train has jumped the tracks. The ideological right left the path of your standard self-righteous indignation and began spewing out hatred and lies for the purpose of political gain. It really blew onto the scene as this nation was supposedly closing the ugly book of racism by electing the first African-American president. Like a cancer on the fabric of our nation, it is multiplying at an alarming rate, which poses the immediate question, what are we prepared to do about it? This is no longer about a woman's right to choose or an accident victim in Florida. It isn't about a birth certificate or socialism. It is about the most fundamental of our rights, life. Whether you believe life is a divine gift or a genetic mutation in the evolutionary chain, surely you can agree at a minimum that life has with it an intrinsic value to those who hold it. When 18,000 Americans are allowed to die each year because they lack health care, we as a nation must respond, if not out of the gentle calling of God, then out of the screaming of humanity. This time last year, I was preparing to lay my adoptive father to rest at Woodlawn Cemetery in New York City, returning him home to his family, friends, and his God. You have heard me speak of my father as both biological and adopted. My biological father had passed away 6 months earlier. As a federal employee, he had very good health care. Not great, but very good. When he passed away, he was buried with honors at Arlington National Cemetery, a soldier, a hero, and a patriot. Any doubts where my love for this country or my deep conviction in the principles it attempts to uphold comes from were shed one spring morning under 21 guns. But that was a few months ago, and an unbelievable twist of fate, the man who chose to be my father was now completing his journey on this earth. His path in life was much different. Unlike my biological father, a disability prevented him from serving in the war. There would be no 21 guns for him. There would also be no government health care. There was a time not long ago that health care wasn't something we worried about, but as my father moved on in years, he would fall more frequently, and the reality of the health care debate that had been in the abstract would soon come to my home. It was a Sunday morning when I walked into the house to see my father lying on the floor. He had just returned from church and tripped in the living room. My instinct was to call 911 when I heard my mother tell me to stop. I can't afford the ambulance copay, "Can we get him in the car?" she asked. In one sentence, the reality of what was happening hit home. My father's last years would bankrupt him. The dream he had of leaving an estate to his wife of 43 years had vanished with his diagnosis of Parkinson's disease. This is a reality being played out in homes across this country as we speak. As those of you who have heard me speak of my father before know, he finally succumbed to his illness when, after failing to eat for nearly 10 days, he had a heart attack, fell into a coma, and died. We had a meeting with my father's doctor in a hallway at an emergency room, where, under relatively urgent circumstances, the decision to honor his wishes and send him home to die was made. Not by some government official or even a doctor, but by my mother and I. As I said earlier, the most painful thing I've ever done in my life was nothing. I don't know that the decision would have been any easier in a doctor's office a few months earlier, but it would have not felt so rushed. It would have been emotional for sure, but thought out. Thanks to Sarah Palin's claim of death panels, you will never know, for Congress has now removed the provision that would have authorized such a visit between you, your loved one, and your doctor to be paid for by insurance. It is no longer about right or wrong. It is about winning, and now there are already casualties. For those of you who legitimately believe this is about socialism, death panels, or government takeovers, in the words of Oliver Cromwell, I beseech you in the bowels of Christ, think it possible that you may be mistaken. For those of you who know better, but are knowingly manipulating the vulnerable just to score a win at any costs, go to hell. For the rest of us who silently sit by while these thugs take over town hall meetings, threaten the life of not just the President of the United States, but his wife and children as well, or allow this debate to be hijacked by those who don't give a damn about this country or her people, it is time to rise up. Our fathers may not have had the health care they deserve, but our children most certainly can. This show is dedicated to the memory of those that have fallen while this debate has raged, and those that are continuing to fall every single day for the lack of health care. These people are not paying a price that is money. They are paying with their lives. They are our friends, our neighbors, our family. We cannot continue to let this happen. I don't know what's right or what's wrong sometimes, but what I do know is that 18,000 people a year dying because they can't afford health care in the richest country in the world is dead wrong. And it's time for us to be motivated enough to do something about it. Don't be afraid. Stand up for what you believe in. Stand up for your fellow man. Write your congressman. Call your congressman. Write your senators. Call your senators. Call your friends. Call your neighbors. Mobilize. If there's a meeting there, go. Do not be afraid. Do not fear. That is what they want you to do. We must stand up and rise up and get this done for the sake of our children. Let our children not fall the same fate as our parents. This has been Common Sense on behalf of my co-hosts Michael O'Connell and Ellie Page. I am Jim Alger. Thank you for joining us. And remember to always replace the spin with common sense.